somebody suggested to me that I should ask Normans, who I was working for just as a salesman there, if I go and ask them if they'll buy you a car, which is how I remember it. And so I went very gingerly to the managing director, who was a man called Stanley Hepworth, and he sort of hummed and hawed, and I got terribly embarrassed about it, and I said, well, thank you very much, sir, and I left the room. And really that was the end of it. I said, waste of time. I said, people don't buy you cars. Anyway, lo and behold, a couple of months went by, and just prior to Christmas I got a phone call to say from Stanley Hepworth that they decided now they would buy me a car, a racing car. So of course I walked up the wall, across the ceiling, down the other side, did a couple of standing backflips, and I couldn't believe my ears that I'd heard this. And it started from there. We went to the racing car show at the Horticultural Hall, and we decided, probably because I'd been racing a sports car, we decided on a Lotus 23, which we ordered from Lotus, and I believe it was chassis number 6, if I can remember rightly, and that was it. Then of course it was a bit of a game getting bits and pieces from Lotus, and we were up and down the road picking up this, picking up that, and slowly but surely we managed to get this car together, of which we took to Aintree for the first race. Unfortunately, every time I came round the canal turn, I hit the brakes and the bloody thing flew off the road, and I thought, I can't believe this. Anyway, I came back into the paddock, and Peter Waugh then came up. He said, how are you getting on, Mike, with that car? I said, no good at all, Pete. I said, it's every time I hit the brakes, the thing's flying off the road. So he had a good look round it, and he said, well, I'm not surprised, because you've got the wishbones on upside down. So however, we learnt from that. We put them round the right way, and I think I finished 5th in the end, but I was struggling, and I couldn't get used to it from my Lotus 11. Anyway, we took the car back to the workshop at King Street at Normans, and there we started heating up steering arms, and eventually we got from what was diabolical towing down to almost zero by bending the steering arms and all this. And we then, from then on, I was really successful with the car. Must have run 20 races with it and had a few lap records, and it was a different car altogether. At the end of '62, we decided we would sell the Lotus 23. We spoke to Colin, and it was his suggestion that would we run the Lotus team, a sports car team. So we said, yeah, we'd love to do that, and I think he helped us towards the price of the cars. And the other thing he was made a stipulation about was the fact that we always had a car for Jimmy to drive. I said, yeah, that'd be fine. So we did the testing, and then we got a new transporter built, not a new vehicle, but it was an old 3-litre Austin, and we did most of the work on it, all the opening sides and the twin ramps on it. And so of course we drove off down to Silverstone, tested the cars together with Tony Hegborn, who was going to be our other driver, and everything seemed fine. And then we started racing with them, and they were pretty successful. And then it came to a race, I think Crystal Palace. There was 4 races: Crystal Palace, Snetterton, Silverstone, Alton Park, where Colin wanted Jimmy to drive the car. I said, that's fine. So he drove and I drove the other car, and he ran all 4 races. I was second, which is par for the course. And that was it. That was how Norman racing really got underway. Believe it or not, I was the only person who did anything apart from the helping my mechanic rebuild them every week. As far as press releases were concerned, I did most of that by rushing back from a circuit, typing it out to the best of my ability, whacking it through a bander machine and posting it off to the various magazines, and that was the extent of our publicity. And to be honest with you, the showroom and the firm, although they appreciated what we're doing, they made nothing out of it at all. They didn't really use it to any advantage. Where, looking at the way things go today, you would have obviously got Jimmy down to the showroom and made a big deal of it, but that just didn't happen in those days. The cars were virtually identical, but my car probably suited me, so obviously it felt to me a little bit better. Jimmy got in the other car, and it was just so natural with him. He just drove it, and he was that much quicker. You know, I couldn't stay with him however hard I tried, and I could probably honestly say that my car might have been a little bit better, but he was such a superb driver that he was always that much quicker. He was following around Crystal Palace, going through the glades there from after the start. He just seemed to be so, I think accurate would be the way to describe it. He always hit the same spot every time he went round there. There was never any deviation. He would aim that car and it hit the same spot every time. And I think it was just the fact that he was so accurate, which I think he proved at places like Indianapolis, where his accuracy going round those around that oval was just unbelievable. I was racing at Brands Hatch in the Boac 500, I think it was, with Tony Dean and a Ferrari, I don't know, whatever it was, a Ferrari sports thing. I can't remember exactly what type it was. And I had a little silver Porsche in those days, and I remember driving back, and I'd already heard in the paddock that Jimmy Clark had been killed, and I just didn't believe it. I can assure you, I just couldn't believe it. And I'm driving back home, I had the radio on, and then it confirmed it to me that he had been killed at Hockenheim. And it was probably the saddest day of my life, really, knowing that, because I couldn't believe a driver so good could have just got written off in a Formula 2 race, of all places, Hockenheim. Yeah, I knew him as a person, and he was just a lovely man. He was a typical, there was no side with him at all. He would go back and deal with his sheep and up at the farm, and you know, the way he just came out, got in a car, and he just had something that, well, to me, he's the best driver of all time, to my way of thinking. Probably because I knew him. I didn't know people like Fangio and that, but I did know Jimmy, and I just couldn't, you know, to me he was just wonderful.